Hello there, and welcome into another edition of the JMac podcast. So glad that you are with us today, as I wanted to answer two questions from our listeners. And this is something I want to do more often. So if you have a question for me, please leave it in the comments. If there's something about, for example, the election or COVID or something like that, actually anything going on, I do so much research and I'm watching the news and reading news feeds so often that I would love to be able to apply my work to any questions that you have. Maybe you heard something and you're like, is that really true? Well, let me know and I will see if I can help you out. So the two questions today have to do, one is kind of a funny, humorous story, and that is what happened at Four Seasons Landscaping. I'm going to try not to laugh. And then the other question is what's going on in Georgia with the recount, and how will Georgia potentially affect the power struggle within the United States Senate? So both really good questions. I want to be able to answer them for you and hopefully in just a short podcast here give you some information that you're looking at or looking for. So starting with what happened at Four Seasons Landscaping. So this actually happened on the day that the election was called for Joe Biden. So that would be this last Saturday. Before the election was called, President Trump tweeted out that there would be a press conference at the Four Seasons. And then shortly after that, he corrected it and said it would actually be at Four Seasons Landscaping. and here's basically how that played out.
This story starts with Donald Trump tweeting that there would be a press conference on Saturday morning at the Four Seasons in Philadelphia. People assumed he meant here, the Four Seasons Hotel, but another tweet followed with a clarification. No, not the hotel, but Four Seasons Total Landscaping, a gardening company in an industrial area on the outskirts of Philadelphia. The Washington Post took in the arc of Donald Trump's presidency with this story headlined, "It began on a gold escalator. It may have ended at Four Seasons Total Landscaping." As you can see from these pictures, it was a low-key affair. A sign attached to the wall, a podium, some journalists, some Trump supporters. A few doors down, the adult bookstore, Fantasy Island, and just across the street from the local crematorium. Remember, the press conference had been called to draw attention to the Trump campaign's claims that the election has been stolen. No evidence was offered, but more broadly, it certainly drew attention. The 78-year-old employee manning the counter at the Fantasy Island sex shop said the phone had been ringing off the hook since Saturday, with callers asking, "Is Rudy Giuliani there?" Well, the team at Four Seasons Total Landscaping appears to have taken this in their stride. In response to criticism online, it's posted on Facebook saying it would proudly host any presidential candidate's campaign at our business. Maybe it will become a fixture in Pennsylvanian politics. It's certainly been quick to see an opportunity. Go online now and you can buy a range of Make America Rake Again and Lawn and Order merchandise.
Make America Rake Again and Lawn and Order merchandise. So apparently, and nobody's admitted to this yet, as far as I can tell, apparently they were supposed to book at the Four Seasons Hotel, and they booked it for Seasons Landscaping. And they went through with it. They set up, and they had their press conference right there. And it's just funny. And then right in the middle of the news conference, a reporter asked Rudy Giuliani if he had heard the news that the election had been called. And of course, he raised his hands to the sky and he's like, "Oh my goodness, the media has decided. We don't let courts decide or states decide. The media has decided." And of course, this is something I've already pointed out, that anyone who's complaining about the media deciding this election seems to have forgotten 2016, when on the evening of the election, the media projected President Trump to be the winner, and nobody from either side of the aisle said, "Wait, the media is deciding? This is an outrage. This should never happen." You decide how you want to perceive that. But there was another story that went around about the Four Seasons, and that is that one of the witnesses that were presented, a poll watcher in Philadelphia, who had some concerns about the poll watching and how he was treated, that he has a very interesting background, perhaps a background that should have been looked into before he was allowed to speak on national TV. Before I tell you about that background, this is what he had to say. His name is Darryl Brooks. Here's what he had to say.
So when I go to the poll, it was basically they put us at 20 feet away. They said no cameras, no phones, you cannot take pictures. I was even harassed by some of the Democratic Party poll watchers, and that is also recorded. And then next thing you know, it was 6 feet away, and they still would not allow us to see anything that was happening. We saw people working on the ballots, but we didn't know any names. We didn't see anything. We don't know if people voted twice or three times. We didn't know if people were dead people were voting. But we were there and we were watching, and it's such a shame. This is a democracy, Philadelphia, and was it corrupt or not? But give us the opportunity as poll watchers to view all the documents, all the ballots. And listen, we just want a fair election.
So this was his comment, and this is one of the witnesses brought forward by Rudy Giuliani. And I find the whole statement that he made to be a little bit strange. Yeah, they started out at 20 feet, and then they were allowed within 6 feet. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought if you'd be complaining, it'd be the other way around. You started at 6, and then they moved you to 20. We know that part of the reason for the 6 feet was because of COVID, but the other point here is you're a poll watcher. You're not a poll verifier. You're not there to verify every vote. You're there to see if where the ballots are being brought in. I don't know what exactly a poll watcher is for, but there's already a Republican and a Democrat and an independent there going through the ballots, and machines are counting these things. So the idea that a poll watcher is actually there to have hands-on and verify every vote and whether they're alive or dead, that's a misrepresentation of what the poll watchers do, and he was there within 6 feet. But so that was his testimony. But now, what have you heard, the rumblings about Darryl Brooks? Well, it turns out that Darryl Brooks has a colorful past, let's put it that way. So he's there on live TV, and the mayor of Trenton, New Jersey, is watching the television, and he's like, wait a minute, I know that guy. And this is Trenton Mayor Rudy Giuliani. I'm sure I'm massacring his last name. But he's like, wait a minute, I know that guy. He's a perennial candidate in New Jersey elections. And not only that, he's a registered and convicted sex offender. Now, the other claim that I heard was that he was not a resident of Philadelphia, that he's a resident of New Jersey. I haven't been able to verify that fact or not, because you're supposed to be a you're supposed to be a resident of Philadelphia if you're going to be a poll watcher. I haven't been able to find that part of the story, but apparently they did fail in their vetting. This individual is a registered sex offender back from the 90s. So that's all I can tell you about that story. But it was just kind of a comedy of errors, going from the Four Seasons to Four Seasons Landscaping, to having a sex offender be your primary witness, to that witness really kind of describing that they weren't held 20 feet away, that they were able to get within 6 feet, contrary to the stories of the time. I just find the whole thing kind of hilarious and kind of sad. Now, let's get to more important issues. The question of, again from one of our listeners, what's going on in Georgia? Where are they at with the recount? And how will they potentially decide the control of the Senate? Well, the recount is triggered automatically because they're within a certain percentage point. So there will be a recount in Georgia, and whether or not that will decide which direction Georgia goes as far as who chooses the president in Georgia remains to be seen. If Georgia somehow flipped and everything else stayed the same, then that will not affect who the next president is going to be. The real issue, what's going on in Georgia, has to do with the control of the United States Senate. Because right now, if everything plays out according to counts and projections, the Senate has 48 on each side. And there are only 2 left because there are 50 senators, right? Or 100 senators, sorry. So 48. And there are 2 left. And both of those are in Georgia. And Georgia requires that a candidate get over 50% to become the candidate. That didn't happen. So they're going to have a runoff on January 5th. And if they split, so let's say one of them, for example, one wins, a Democrat wins one and a Republican wins the other, then the power stays with Republicans. But if both seats go to Democrats, then Democrats will control the Senate because Kamala Harris, will be the deciding vote or the tiebreaker. Now, I have to tell you, just one of the things where I've had a little bit of comfort in my heart is the belief that Joe Biden is going to be the next president, but he won't have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So he will be checked, and he'll have to work with Republicans. Because you know me, I'm a conservative. I want smaller government, and so really a lot of Joe Biden's programs I don't want. But I couldn't bring myself to vote for Trump either, and you know why. I've shared that with you. So it was kind of a solace for me. Well, okay, we're going to have Joe Biden, but his power is going to be checked, so that's great. Well, if the Democrats win both of these seats, then that scenario disappears for me, and I become much more worried, and I know many of you will. This is a description of how it will affect the Senate.
The battle for control of the Senate now rests on a pair of high-stakes runoff elections in Georgia. The races will be held January 5th, after the candidates failed to capture 50% of the vote. Incumbent Republican Senator David Perdue will face Democratic challenger Jon Ossoff, while the state's other incumbent Republican Senator, Kelly Loeffler, will go against Democrat Raphael Warnock. Democrats will need to win both runoffs in order for Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to become the tie-breaking vote in the Senate.
So my hope is that the Senate remains in Republican control. I know that may sound weird to some of you, but I actually like a little gridlock and checks and balances. I don't like it when either party gets all the control. I start to worry in those circumstances. So that is my hope. But what's going to happen is millions and millions of dollars are going to go into Georgia right now. And can you imagine? I don't know if they're going to have any regular television programming at all. It's just going to be one political commercial after another. And if I'd be living in Georgia right now, I don't think I'd turn my TV or my radio on because of that. It is going to be madness. It could go down in history as the most expensive campaigns in American history. Seriously, that's how important this is. So we'll keep an eye on that here on the JMac podcast. We'll keep you up to date on that. But I hope that answers a couple of your questions. Please take a minute and scan the barcode if you're watching, or go in the description of this podcast if you're listening, and become a patron. That would mean a commitment of $5, $10, $2 a month, whatever it is, to help me bring this podcast to you on a regular basis, or make a one-time donation. And we have a lot more election coverage coming up. Thank you for joining me for this brief, quick podcast. I hope I've answered some questions. And again, send me your questions. I'll do my best to answer them in the comments of wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. Have a great day.